Hey YouTube friends, I'm out here in my church's community garden where I grew a ton of lima beans this year. And I want to show you how I am going to shell all of these beans. How can I do it? Shelling them by hand is going to take forever because I've got over 20 pounds of beans. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to show you a do-it-yourself automatic bean sheller that you can do that's simple, cheap, and it will make shelling your beans so much easier. So let's dig in. Beans are one of my favorite garden vegetables to grow, and it's one of the easiest. They are super simple, very low maintenance. They don't need any fertilizer. They also improve the soil, and they taste great. They're totally nutritious, and they store almost forever. I grew over 20 pounds of lima beans in my church's community garden this year, and I chose to do that because these raised beds in this community garden, I knew that I wasn't going to be out here all of the time, but they needed something to grow in them, something that could grow without me having to tend them all of the time. So I planted these beans, I watered them for about a week to get them established, and after that, I didn't do anything to them until it was time to harvest. But with so many beans, how can you shell them all? You can shell fresh beans by hand, and I do that a lot of times when I'm doing field peas or black-eyed peas because I can shell them as I go. I harvest a little bit, shell them, then go back the next day or two, harvest some more and shell them. But with these lima beans, I harvested them all at one time. The easiest way to shell lima beans is to dry them all. And so I spread them all out on a table, and you can spread them out on a table or a shelf or someplace dry. Let them dry for about 2 weeks. You can also let them dry on the vine themselves, and many of these lima beans that I harvested in the community garden were already dry on the vine. If it's really rainy outside, then that's going to be harder to do. But if you got some good weather that's cooperating, and we had several weeks of dry weather, then the beans will dry right on the vine. In order to shell these beans with my automatic sheller, you're going to need a few things. An electric drill. It doesn't matter if it's cordless or a corded drill. Most people have some kind of a drill, whatever kind of drill you have. The next thing you're going to need is a threaded rod. And you can pick one of these up at any hardware store like Ace, Home Depot, or Lowe's. It doesn't really matter what size threaded rod you have, except that the diameter of the rod needs to be able to fit inside your drill truck. Also, you want a rod that's long enough to be able to go inside the bucket and fit all the way down to the bottom of the bucket. But you don't want it to be so long that it's unwieldy. Then you're going to need 2 nuts that fit on that threaded rod. Lastly, you're going to need a chain 6 inches, 7 inches, just something that's long enough that it will kind of cover the distance of the inside of your bucket. You're also going to need a 5-gallon bucket with a lid. Now you want to take a drill or something to cut out about a 2-inch hole in the center of the lid on your bucket. Thread one of the nuts on the end of the threaded rod, then you're going to slip your chain length on that threaded rod. You want to center it so that you're putting the rod through the center link on your length of chain, and then you're going to simply put the other nut on to sort of screw down and lock the chain into place. Next, you insert the threaded rod into the chuck on your drill, tighten that down, and now you're simply going to insert the rod into your bucket. Inside the bucket, you're going to place a quantity of beans. I wouldn't fill the bucket up, maybe halfway, but certainly not full. quarter of the way, halfway full. And now you're simply going to drill your dried beans for 1 to 2 minutes to break up all of the shells and allow the beans inside the shells to fall out into the bottom of your bucket. Now you should have a bucket full of both empty husks and dried beans, and maybe a little bit of trash like leaves and twigs and stems and things like that. So you're going to have to separate those beans from the rest of the material somehow. You could do that by hand, but there's a easier way. Use a box fan. Then you're going to pour the beans and the husk and all the other stuff in the bucket across the fan. The wind from the fan is going to blow the trash away because it's lighter, but the beans, which are heavier, are going to fall down into the bucket. You may lose some beans, and if you're really particular and you want to save every last bean, you just can go through those husks that have fallen out on the ground and pick out any beans that somehow got separated. But most of your beans, 95% of your beans, are going to fall into the bucket, and the rest of the trash, the husks, twigs, leaves, dust, dirt, those sort of things are going to blow away. Now this method should work for other dried beans besides lima beans. Things like black-eyed peas, field peas, cream peas, pinto beans, etc. Try it out. Let me know if this method works for you. You may need to adjust the distance from your fan as well as the distance between your buckets in order to get just the right distance settings so that you are keeping as many beans as possible while blowing away as much trash as possible. Using this method will help you get your beans out of their shells. But I want to tell you something that may be helpful for you in your life. 2 Timothy chapter 1 verse 7 says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline." And Mark chapter 16 verse 15 says, Jesus said to them, "Go into all the world and proclaim the gospel to the whole creation." So we have to learn to come out of our shell. Some people are naturally outgoing and find it easy to talk to people. If you're like me, I tend to be an introvert. That means that I tend to keep to myself. I'm kind of a shy person. I know that sounds strange for someone who makes his living as a preacher and is standing in front of people talking all the time, but that's because God called me to do that, and God has enabled me to do that. Over 20 years, I've had a lot of practice of overcoming my shyness so that I can get in front of people and speak. But naturally, I am a shy person. And yet I also know that God wants me to come out of my shell and to be able to talk with people. I learn a lot through talking to people, and I grow so much as a person as I do that. Even those of us who are kind of keep to ourselves or introverts, we also need people. So we have to learn to come out of our shells, because it helps us to grow as a person, but it also gives us an opportunity to share our faith with other people as well. Just getting out there and talking to people, and you're not going out necessarily trying to beat people over the head with a Bible. It's simply being able to talk about what God is doing in your life and how He's making a difference for you. God has made so much of a difference in my life, and I want to be able to tell that to people. And I just want to be able to talk with people and find out about who they are and hear about how I might be able to pray for them. So we all have to learn to come out of our shells in one way or another. And God can help you do that, just as He's helped me do it. So let's all get out there, come out of our shells, and let's grow and be fruitful.